Hi, today I'm going to talk to you about the heritage of American tenpins. In Europe during the 17th century, forms of the game of bowling at 9 pins became extremely popular with the varieties of games played widely in most of Europe. It was often found as a game of social amusement at inns and taverns where places where the proprietor would wish the visitor to linger and consume more and spend more money, and where the social humanity would meet each other. Bowling had a unique magic. Just about anyone could roll a ball. This photo or this drawing is it's an oil painting from the 17th century. One of the largest images of the game of bowling. It was painted by a Dutch artist during the time when his home country was colonizing the North and South America continents. This photo was made in the 1660s. It was it was a painting showing that bowling actually did exist somewhere along the way. You know, kind of in a looks like it's a kind of a farming or a picnic type community, and uh, you know, the Dutch game of bowling included the equipment required to play the game. Came with the settlers of the old country. Uh, it always was been thought of as a social gathering place where games of 9 pin could be played on lawns with great social relish. In the early colonial period, pins and bowling balls were brought to America in the luggage of an immigrant who played the game in the home country. The equipment was all homemade or handmade, and as a result, there were many types of balls, and pins, all unique with various sizes and weights. As the game developed, a gutter was added, not as a hazard, but to simplify the returning of the bowling ball to the player from the pin deck. A job was always handled by a pin boy. Today, in the sport, there's two gutters, one on each side of the lane, where if you throw it in the gutter, it counts as zero. If the ball happens to bounce out of the gutter, which does occur occasionally, that is called a foul. But gutters these days are not used for the same thing gutters were used in those days. Now it's just a form of the bowling ball. It's almost like a penalty. Bowling balls in the old days were uh, sent back to the player in the gutter, and that's where the pin boy would run down the lane and set the pins up and then run back. In 1770, the population of America had reached 2.2 million. It was mostly agricultural, growing with urban areas around New York City. Uh, New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore, cities that would later become hotbeds for the sport of bowling. The attraction to these places offered bowling created social unions of people and ideas. Support for the run up to the American Revolution in colonial America, since free speech was governed and tightly controlled, the meetings in the taverns and inns were socialized, allowed word of discourse, revolution spread. In 1793, when the cotton gin was invented, uh, the growth of manufacturing uh, employed many people, and began to urbanize, and a new metropolitan lifestyle evolved as factories sprang up. Food grills and bowling taverns were popular hotspots because bowling was renewed as a widely played social sport. So food and bowling, that's why you probably see it everywhere else now. The problem with bowling, though, uh, it kind of spawned it brought some as the good people it brought also some bad people, and there's we started seeing gambling uh, in cahoots with bowling, and the gambling brought the crime and the beer and the smoking, and so the bowling that was fun is still fun, but now you've got some added variables that are not so fun. So in Oswego, New York, they outlawed nine-pin alleys, implying that perhaps this establishment had been had trying to add a pin. What they did was they took the nine-pin alleys and they made them 10-pin alleys, so they could bypass the law. But the people in there were making public nuisances. It was a source of gambling. The game was popular, and it made bar patrons come and linger to spend money. But there was also that sense of crime that kind of came along with the good people. It says stories of criminals haunting 10-pin alleys didn't help the game's reputation, but the game was popular and fun to everybody, even a police officer attempting to apprehend a criminal appreciated the sport and the social merit. By many citizens, the social interaction brought forth a game of 10 pins and was a very beloved thing in their lives. With no other rivaling sport available for common man, bowling became a primary form of entertainment. Not only was the game fun to play with its exciting reward, penalty, strikes, spares format, it was also pleasing to socialize with a beer or rum and simply observing the behaviors of the players, the reactions to success or failure was the attraction of the game. In 1896, the American Bowling Congress, which is now the USBC, well, currently they have a governing body, created a new way of scoring where a strike counts as 10 plus the pinfall count achieved on the next two balls. Only two balls were allowed in each frame. This reduced the game to a minimum of 12 balls for a perfect game or a score of 300. And with the introduction of automatic scoring, maybe a bowling game that may have lasted maybe an hour because you had to set the pins up and send the ball back, and depending on how many bowling balls they actually had to throw per frame, now only took 20 minutes. So they kind of revolutionized the time and the scoring process in 1896. In 1887, an inter-club tournament competition grew as bowlers visited other bowling facilities. Competition was not as quite fair since a wide variety of bowling conditions were presented. The existing broad variety of pins, balls, and lanes made fair competition very difficult, and it became obvious to bowling clubs that common rules and standards of the game were needed to be formed and adapted. The American Bowling Congress was successful in establishing a set of rules for for the game for American 10 pins, a move that would set up the sport for a long period of time. Common rules would allow bowling competitions between clubs and bowlers to be contested without a technical advantage, either in equipment they carried or the place where they actually bowled. The rules have been morphed and changed over decades, primarily in response to technology changes. The rules adopted for the game of 10 pins is pretty much the same, and but the bowling equipment has changed tremendously. They went from stone bowling balls or wood bowling balls to a rubber polymer bowling ball to a resin reactive bowling ball, and everything has changed. The pin weights have changed, the lanes have changed, and so bowling now is what it's going to be. I don't. It's everything is just changing. But then, it was a sort of form of simplicity. But yes, it still attracts the riffraff, and there's also, it attracts young crowds along with old crowds. But there's still a kind of a form of riffraff that shows up, and it is tied into gambling. There are casinos that have bowling alleys now, and casinos that have food places along with bowling. So there's a draw, and bowling is what it's going to be. Now the bowling alleys are popping up left and right, and like entertainment places for kids, and there's all forms of wanting to enjoy bowling. So that's my story. Thank you.